What's up guys, Nor here and welcome to Book of Showtime chapter 55. As always, be sure to leave a like and share with your friends, and if you have a topic you'd like me to cover for Book of Showtime, be sure to leave it in the comment section down below, or anywhere you can reach me on social media or the Book of Showtime Discord. Well, before we get into this chapter, guys, I actually want to apologize for the delay in chapters. I had planned to take just 1 week off after putting out 2 in 1 week, but then my brother went on vacation, and like a dragon, Infinite Wealth has had me in a vice grip. But here I am, and true to my word, I'm bringing you my games of the year every year from 2011 to 2021. Now, you might have noticed I'm not covering the year 2022 as originally planned. Well, that's because one of my earliest chapters covered my favorite games of 2022 already, so reconveying my feelings would just sort of be a waste of time. So enough with the formalities, let's jump right in with 2011 LA Noire. LA Noire was special, man. The mocap, the characters, and who doesn't love a good period piece drama? I know I do. This is a game that I need to replay. It is a fun experience. There's just something about being a detective in games that I find really satisfying. I spoke about this game in the best one and done chapter, so I'll just quickly move on to the runner-ups, which include Dead Space 2, Gears 3, and Mortal Kombat. Dead Space 2 and Gears 3 were both tremendous follow-ups to their respective predecessors. I actually recently finished playing through Dead Space 2 again, and it holds up tremendously well. Such a great game. As for Mortal Kombat, it was actually the first fighting game I was really good at. I mentioned it was also the most important Mortal Kombat game back in chapter 48, and I always keep it installed on my computer just in case any of you scholars want to go first to 5. 2012, Call of Duty Black Ops 2. You've heard me say this a lot, but Black Ops 2 is pound for pound the best Call of Duty in the series. Thrilling campaign, elite multiplayer, and a bold new zombies experience combined for one of the best games we've seen in its era. There's a reason fans clamor for a remaster. This might be a perfect shooter. Runners up are Sleeping Dogs, Rock Band Blitz, and NBA 2K13, which might surprise you guys. Sleeping Dogs, I already spoken about its greatness in chapter 53, just an amazing experience. Go try it if you haven't. Rock Band Blitz, that was a beautiful rhythm game. I sank probably close to 500 hours in it, trying to set new records and just experiencing the music in such a fun and visually stimulating way. But NBA 2K, that was something special. I was never into playing sports games, but that game, it just grabbed me from the trailers. It was produced by Jay-Z, and man, it was just such a great sports sim. Probably the last basketball game I'll ever be into. They just fell off hard for me after 2K13. Also, for anyone who's played it, do you guys remember how busted signature skills were in that game? And you couldn't even block dunks, so highlight film, posterizer, finisher, that was an evil combination. What a time. 2013, Payday 2. I know what you're thinking. Payday 2 over Grand Theft Auto 5? Yes. I loved executing heists with my friends, and by execute I mean sit back watching my one friend try to stealth the current day before we fail and just going guns blazing. Payday 2 is also one of the best ongoing games I ever seen. It's so unrecognizable in terms of content and features from what it was when it launched. Overkill poured their souls into it. It's a shame Payday 3 was a fraction of what Payday 2 was, so I'm just going to stick with Payday 2, which, by the way, I always keep on my PC if anybody's down. Runners-up include the aforementioned Grand Theft Auto 5 and Splinter Cell Blacklist. Now, Grand Theft Auto 5, it was a fun game, but the story just wasn't fulfilling on the level of 4. None of the protagonists were as, I just couldn't root for them as I could CJ, Vic Vance, and Nico Bellic. And Grand Theft Auto Online was a mess, and even once it got fixed, it was kind of void of content. Splinter Cell Blacklist, that was a clean game, possibly overlooked. I remember when this game was first announced, I remember some website was bashing it pre-release, but I got it and I did just about all the content that I could. I unlocked everything. It's a great game and it's backwards compatible on Xbox, so go give it a try. 2014, Infamous Second Son. So far, this is the biggest delta on the list between winner and runner-up. Infamous Second Son, to me, is the best PS4 game of all time. Full stop. It had everything. The graphics, the world, the story, and choices. It was all great, and it was such a fun game to play. I'm putting all the emphasis I can on the FUN. It was fun. All the powers they give you, it rocked, man. And it made good use of the PlayStation 4's touchpad and gyro controls. This was a bona fide killer app, in my opinion. The lone runner-up this year was Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. Now, the Advanced Movement era gets a little bit of a bad rep, and yeah, Advanced Warfare was not what most Call of Duty fans wanted, but that doesn't mean it wasn't a fun game. It was chock full of content day one, and I think the zombies is some of the best non-Treyarch zombies we've ever seen, though sadly it was locked behind a paywall. Exo Survival, on the other hand, it wasn't, and that was a very fun survival mode. When you look at dollar for value, this is one of the better Call of Duties in that department. Advanced Warfare was as solid as it gets. 2015, Dying Light. Dying Light, man, I really wish I wasn't late to the party, but I'm still glad I was able to play with my friend Zorky before he retired from hanging out with me. The game was super fun to start with, you know, especially running from those demons at night, and it got even more fun once you unlock the shield and the grapple hook. Zorky and I, we actually played the game like it was Rainbow Six Siege when it came to facing humans. I'd play as point man with a shield, and he would stay behind me taking shots when he could. It was fantastic. I miss Zorky. Everybody go harass him on my behalf. Runners up include Resident Evil Revelations 2 and Mortal Kombat X. This was actually pretty close. I enjoyed Revelations 2, though I honestly have no real desire to ever play it again. I don't know why, but playing the game solo is just better to me. I never finished with any of my partners, but even playing solo, I played it once and it's like, that's it, I think I'm done. I really enjoyed the game's mysterious story, the elements of stealth, the Resident Evil 0 type dynamic between the characters, and the episodic releases. This was something very bold from Capcom, which I always love how experimental Capcom is with their games, especially the Revelations games. They always add new things. As for Mortal Kombat X, just an across-the-board improvement from Mortal Kombat 9. It has some of my favorite characters in the series, in addition to plenty of cool new ones. Brutality system just rocked. This was just a good fighting game. 2016, Overwatch. This was not as tough as I'd like it to be. Titanfall 2 was amazing, but Overwatch, man, at the time, it was the freshest shooter I've played in years, and it was one where I can actually be good at for once. I was terrible at Call of Duty. I loved all the characters, the interactions they had with one another was so cool to experience for the first time. The maps were great, the events were really fun, and I just had a great time playing the game. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'm probably the best Moira main in the Bronx. Come try me. It's a massive disappointment how much Overwatch has fallen from grace. You know, Overwatch 2 is such an embarrassment to what this game was in its prime. It's such a massive disappointment how much Overwatch has fallen from grace. Overwatch 2 is such an embarrassment to what Overwatch 1 was in its prime. The lone runner-up this year is Titanfall 2, and I will never forgive Electronic Arts, I'm using their full name, for releasing this game between Battlefield and Call of Duty. Most people ended up skipping out on one of the best FPS games in the decade, and it's crazy to think in 2016, 2 all-time great shooters dropped. How cool is that? Actually, excuse me, 3, because you gotta count Doom. While Titanfall 2 boasted a stellar and competitive multiplayer, where I personally fell in love with the game was its fantastic single-player campaign. I love the games where you play as one dude who's just a badass, can I say that on this channel? And the relationship displayed between protagonist Jack Cooper and his Titan BT, that was just so fun to be a part of. It's a better love story than Twilight. 2017, Resident Evil 7. This was a no-brainer. Resident Evil 7 is not only a top 5 Resident Evil game, but possibly a top 5 most important horror game as well. Not only did it bring back the franchise in a huge way, but it brought back the genre in a big way too. Not to mention setting the bar that so many games have tried to emulate in the years since its release. I've spoken plenty about this game at length throughout Book of Showtime's lifespan, so I'll just jump quickly into next year. You guys know I love Resident Evil, I'll talk about it for hours. Real quick, the runners-up are Super Mario Odyssey, which I personally feel is the best Switch game, just a fantastic, beautiful, delightful piece of software. And The Evil Within 2, which was a great follow-up to the original, though I do wish it had some bonus content like a Horde type mode. I don't really feel that New Game Plus is kind of bonus content. I'm sorry. 2018, Yakuza Kiwami 2. Crazy how niche this series was back in 2018, right? Like, Yakuza really blew up in the last few years. Anyway, 2018, as I look back, was a bit of a down year for me in terms of games I like, and yeah, I didn't care too much for God of War or Red Dead. And Black Ops 2 was fun for a little bit, but it just didn't have that staying power, you know, that shelf life I expect from a Call of Duty, it just wasn't there. And Judgment, I didn't play until the remaster, and honestly, I'm glad, because that game has some wonky combat at 30 frames per second. Even at 60 frames, the combat's a little out there. But back to Kiwami 2, this was actually the first game on the Dragon engine, and when I initially played it, I was kind of turned off at the game being 30 frames as opposed to 60 in the prior titles, Kiwami and Zero, but upon playing the game for a few hours, I very quickly figured out why. You can seamlessly go from the overworld into most interiors, and the physics engine was ridiculous with the way you can slam your opponents into bikes and bus stops, and just everything around the environment gets broken. The game was so much more alive. It also, in true Yakuza fashion, had a tremendous amount of content, which most of you will find fulfilling and engaging. Runner-up was the first game we covered on the October Selects, Vermintide 2, and my opinion hasn't changed much on that game. It's the best Left 4 Dead style game since Left 4 Dead 2 back in 2009, which is high praise, as Left 4 Dead 2 is one of the greatest games of all time in my opinion. 2019, Resident Evil 2. While my opinion of Resident Evil 2 has shifted a bit in recent years, especially after seeing how Alan Wake 2 handled its two protagonists in the story, this was still a fantastic recreation of one of my all-time favorite games. I remember when I first played it, I was worried I'd be too sick. I was throwing up earlier in the day, but I made it into work, and then I wasn't able to get a nap off, but I was still able to knock out a huge chunk of Leon's story before I eventually had to tap in and pass out. And I just noticed I'm rambling. I'm sorry. I was just so happy to be playing Resident Evil 2, this remake. We've been waiting for this game for years, especially since we were technically old remakes of 2 and 3, and this goes back over 20 years. So this is a great game that I think was worth the wait and lived up to all the hype. Runner-ups are the electric Rage 2 and the masterfully done Control. Rage 2 is one of those fun games that makes you happy to be a gamer. It's just such a great game. I do wish it had co-op. Control, that was an insane game. It's right behind Resident Evil 2 for Game of the Year. Remedy was in their bag when they cooked it. They reached deep into their bag of tricks for that one. Though the hardest boss in that game, unfortunately, was the frame rate, as I played on Xbox One, and it could be a little rough at times. So if you want to try out Control, make sure you're playing it on a next-gen console or you have a beast PC. 2020, Yakuza Like a Dragon. For a year that was filled with so much turmoil, so much discourse, so much pain, it was gaming that was the one true consistent. I finished 70 games that year, and some of the standouts of that list were games released that very year, headlined by one of the greatest RPGs I ever played, Yakuza Like a Dragon. A game that did so much right for a genre I detest so much. This was a spiritual experience from start to finish. The gameplay, the story, everything was amazing. This is one of those perfect games. Runner-ups include the amazing Doom Eternal, a worthy follow-up to the tremendous 2016 reboot, and 2 remakes, in that of Final Fantasy VII, which I didn't expect to enjoy as much, but the story and music, it grabbed me. It grabbed me right by the heart. And Black Mesa, a remake of Half-Life, and is probably my favorite non-horror horror game. Let me know down below, actually, what is your favorite non-horror horror game? Also, Last of Us Part 2 sucks. And finally, 2021, Psychonauts 2. One of the most endearing, beautiful, and nurtured games I ever played, with an emotionally fulfilling story about healing and redemption, great voice acting, and simple but fun and engaging gameplay. Psychonauts 2 was an all-timer, and can you believe it was on Game Pass day 1? To play this game for free just was an extreme treat. It felt like a privilege. It's the first game in years that I gave a 10 out of 10, and I know that might not mean much to you guys, but this might be the definition of a perfect game. From the development process to the end credits, everything was amazing. The lone runner-up this year is Resident Evil Village, a worthy follow-up to Resident Evil 7 that paid homage to the action horror displayed in prior installments, while still pushing the ball forward with some gripping and haunting sections. This was a great follow-up to a great game. Resident Evil is kind of on like a LeBron James in the East realm. Like, all the main games from 7 to 4 remake have been great. I love Resident Evil. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know down below, what was the game of the year in the year that you turned 18? For me, it would have been Dying Light in 2015. Inshallah, I will see you in the next chapter.